welcome to our first ever episode of our IISE podcast series. So, my name is Isabella Calandriello. I'm a second year IE student with a CS minor from Caracas, Venezuela. So, shout out to everyone from Venezuela who's watching this, probably, I don't know. So, I'm also IISE's communications officer and, well, the host of this event today. And let me just briefly discuss the purpose of this podcast. It's just our first episode. So the overall purpose is just to provide IE students with more opportunities to just make the most out of their experiences here at Tech, not only related to academics, but also with job searching opportunities, getting an internship, especially since I'm a sophomore as well, and I need those tips from you guys. And who else is more important to give us that information than our own IE students, and especially from our own Exec board. And they've had a range of diverse experiences and worked with companies like General Electric, EY, Accenture, and have done research in the healthcare industry, which is overall really impressive. I'm really impressed by you guys. So let's start. And if you guys could just go ahead, maybe one by one, saying your name, your major, just a briefly introduction of the companies you've worked with and things along those lines.
Yeah, I can jump in here and go first. So my name is Ria. I am a fourth year industrial engineering student with a concentration in supply chain from Marietta. If some of you are familiar, it's just about 30 minutes outside of Atlanta. I currently serve as our IISE president. Last year I served as our VP of professional planning, and then before that as a professional planning officer. So I think a lot of us that you have here are from the professional planning group. So I think that says a lot about I guess all the cool things we get to do there. In terms of work experience, so the summer after my freshman year, I didn't work. I actually studied abroad at GTL. So happy to talk about those experiences as well. And then summer after my sophomore year, I was a lean manufacturing intern at GE Gas Power in Greenville. And that was a really great learning experience in terms of process improvement, root cause analysis, and also just driving strong change in the face of resistance. This past summer, I was a tech consulting intern with EY in their financial services office. Was supposed to be in Charlotte. Unfortunately, had to do it out of my parents' basement for the summer, so that was really fun. And this semester, kind of silver lining, I guess, out of COVID, is I was able to move up some classes I was supposed to take this semester, take them over the summer. So I'm currently working at Tesla in San Francisco. So I'm taking this meeting a little earlier than you guys are. So yeah, that's me.
Wow, that's just amazing, honestly. Now, like, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Cool. Yeah, so I'm Melody Shellman. I'm from Aurora, Colorado, which is just a suburb outside of Denver. I'm currently a fourth year industrial engineering student with a concentration in operations research. But a little bit, the unique thing about my college experience too is when I've also been studying pre-medical studies to prepare to go to medical school in the long term. So throughout my college experience, I've had different experiences, but I've really been focused in the healthcare industry. Starting after my freshman year, I did a role that's not very traditional IE. It was more traditional like biology, where I worked in a lab setting, like doing studies on mice and like also just analyzing different data sets to understand the difference between types of T cells for potential cancer treatments. And after that summer, I started a co-op, a two-term co-op, so not a Georgia Tech registered co-op, just a two-term internship with a company called Logistics Management Institute, which is a government consulting agency, and I worked particularly in their healthcare sector as a data analyst. So I worked on the assistance of monitoring different healthcare plans related to the Affordable Care Act, which most people have heard about, and also Medicare Advantage, which is like insurance for really old people. Most recently, I've been working as an undergraduate research assistant with the health analytics team here at Georgia Tech. And I use a lot of tools like we learn in class, like regression and Markov renewal processes to understand treatment engagement, particularly to understand how patients who have mental health diseases, especially Georgia youth, access the Medicaid system. Yeah, that's it overall. I was planning to study abroad this past summer, but that obviously didn't happen. And I guess like Ria, it's kind of shifted my plans in college. I can now graduate on time though, so it is a little bit nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the last one to go. So I'm Kat. I'm a third-year industrial engineering student. I have a concentration in data analytics, and I'm from Leesburg, Virginia, so that's right outside of DC. And a little bit about kind of my professional background. So my first summer after freshman year, I actually studied abroad. I went to Spain and I did the LBAT programs, if you know what those are, and finished my Spanish minor, which was really cool. And then coming out of my second year, I actually worked at Accenture as a consulting development analyst, which is a really fun experience. That was my first internship experience. So I got to learn a lot there, and that was really fun. I worked on a cloud transformation and data analytics project as like a data analytics concentration. That was really interesting to me. So I was really glad to get to work in there. In terms of what I do in IISE, so I started out my freshman year as a professional planning officer, and then this year I'm serving as the director of information sessions. So it's really cool to be able to kind of contact different companies and just work with different recruiters. It's really great kind of outreach and practice and networking. So that's been really great. And then what I do here at Tech as well, just like Melody, I'm actually in the same health analytics group. So in that, I work on a little bit of different projects kind of all over the place. I mainly focus on geographical information systems and kind of the data analytics behind that. So mostly we look at the differences between different census tracts and providers to figure out which areas are lacking care. So with that kind of role, I work in the mental and behavioral health group a little bit. I've done a lot on the dental health group, and then I've done a little bit with COVID research, which was pretty cool. And I think that's about it for me.
Wow. Okay, so now that we've discussed about ourselves, let's just dive in straight to the first questions. And they're just about our minor, like if your minors, if you have one, or your IE concentrations, basically. So, first of all, how important do you think is choosing an IE concentration? Do you think that it really, like, it changes the path that you take, or do you think it's something that we should not stress a lot about? And yeah, just that in general.
I can jump in. I think that is a good question. I did not pick my concentration until second semester junior year because I wasn't really informed about when that was supposed to happen. I don't know the earliest you can do it, but to be honest, I think it really does not matter all that much what concentration you choose. Like, for example, I'm in operations research. If I just changed one single class, I could switch to data analytics and be like Kat. I think it's more important to just pick out classes that you're legitimately interested in and have inherent interest in, because you're going to get through college a lot easier if you're taking classes that you're passionate about over just picking it because you think the concentration sounds better than a different concentration.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I agree with Kat completely. I think it's just take a look at the course schedule and try to figure out I'm sorry, not Kat, Melody. I was looking at Kat, sorry. Yeah, just take a look at what classes you find most interesting and take those. I don't think any company will hire you because you're a supply chain engineering concentration over a data analytics concentration. Sure, it definitely does give you skills that prepare you better for some roles rather than others, but I think the IE core curriculum is so solid that it's very easy to pick up those things should you need to. So I can speak from my experience. I'm a supply chain engineering concentration, and I've worked in manufacturing, consulting, and project management roles, which have literally nothing to do with each other, and have nothing to do with supply chain either. So I don't know if I'm a good example of that, but I've found that a lot of people tend to be in the same boat where if you're maybe a data analytics concentration, yes, that leans itself more heavily to your role, but for the rest of them, I feel like it's kind of just whatever you like to do and whatever classes you like to take. Those are just my thoughts, though.
Yeah, and to kind of just follow up on everything, like I recently just declared my concentration, so I did that maybe 2 weeks ago. So it was really recent for me. And from talking to my advisor, just kind of learning more about that, I went in a little bit stressed, not really sure what I wanted to do. And it kind of just comes down to, it's, in my opinion, more of a way to steer your classes to what you're interested in. It's like 6 classes that you take in your concentration. So it's more about what you're interested in and what engages you in school. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really even go on your diploma, I think. It's just like something you can put on your resume. Like they don't record it anywhere when they give you like your diploma or anything like that. So it's very much a little bit more personal and just what you're interested in. And like Melody said, you can easily kind of navigate from one to another just by changing a couple of classes. So it's definitely something you have like time to figure out. And if you get into something and realize it's not what you want to do, you have that option to change around.
Yeah. Also, Kat, I know that you have a minor. So could you like briefly discuss like why do you choose to have a minor and how do you think it has shifted your opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. So I do have a minor. I just finished my minor this summer after my freshman year. So I finished it while I was in Spain abroad. So what interested me in Spanish specifically is I did it all through high school. I started in 7th grade and just kind of took it up to the AP level. So I really was interested in it. And since I did it for that long, I wasn't willing to kind of just let it go. So I knew I wanted to do it in college. And I also was really interested in studying abroad. And specifically, I wanted to be able to take that minor and apply it in a study abroad place and really focus on trying to become a little bit more bilingual and enhancing the skills that I learned in high school. It's just very different when you're learning a language to be learning it in class and then to actually get thrown into a foreign country and have to speak to get around. So that's why I did it. I wanted that challenge. And then it also turned out to be a really great experience for me, being able to kind of take a different direction than what my normal major was. Spanish is definitely not the technical side. It's not engineering. It's a nice little kind of refresher. And that was really cool to be able to take a summer and just do that and have a different focus in my learning. And I think in general, it isn't a huge add to my degree. It's more something that I wanted to do for myself, and it lended me to do the study abroad I wanted, but it definitely does help a little bit. It's something of interest that sometimes people look at my resume and go, oh, I didn't expect that. You have a Spanish minor. That's pretty cool. Just kind of something off to the side that is a fun fact, I guess. There are definitely more minors. Like I know a CS minor is a little different, and that one does really add to your degree. So when you're looking at minors, that's really important, in my opinion, to kind of decide if it's something you want to do because you're interested in it, or if you want to do something specifically to add to your degree, because there are different minors that lend to those different fields.
Yeah, it's really inspiring that you went with something that you actually wanted to do, not just because it was what recruiters wanted, but just because you felt that you wanted to do it. Yeah. Now let's shift a little bit more into the application process and finding jobs, finding internships. So you guys know that there are a lot of things like career fairs, info sessions, and coffee chats, and then just like LinkedIn and Career Buzz. So many places where we can just like find internships and jobs. What do you think are the most important ones, or that the ones that help you the most when finding your job or your internship? And if you could rank maybe your top three and say why?
I think if there's something I've learned throughout both being really heavily involved in ISE's like recruiting events and also just like as a student going through this for the last 4 years, this is my fourth recruitment like cycle. So I've been through the ringer a couple times, I think it's fair to say. And I think you really learn, and it took me maybe 2 or 3 years to learn this. There's like a rhythm to it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's sort of a way of going about it that you can't, it's difficult for me to explain to you until you go through it a couple times. So if I had to kind of speak to my process, I think the ranking of which sites that I use and which resources I use changed depending on what point in my career journey I was in. Freshman year, I applied. I mean, I went to every career fair. I went to the all majors career fairs. I went to the CS career fair. Obviously, I went to our ISYE career fair. I was everywhere. I really wanted a job. Ended up looking at my options and didn't really like what my options were. And so I ended up studying abroad. I'll be very candid. It's just because I did none of the things that I was looking at were some things that I could see myself doing in the long term. And a couple of them were co-op positions, and I just that early on didn't want to be locked into a co-op position. I will say, just as like kind of a temporary side note, if you can study abroad, do it. And the summer after your freshman year, I think is like the absolute perfect time to do it. I don't mean to rub any salt in the wound, Melody. I know you weren't able to go this summer, but I will say that there's something about being 18 and being across the world with your friends that you just can't replicate literally throughout any other experience. And I think sometimes tech becomes so career focused that it's very easy to forget that. So that's my little side note spiel. If you can study abroad at any point in your life, go do it. I can't recommend it enough. It like completely, people cliche say it changed my life, but I really think in a lot of ways it did. Coming back to the question at hand though, I think my freshman year I relied pretty heavily on Career Buzz, on like just resources that were like easily accessible to me as a freshman. So, going to all these career fairs, relying on Career Buzz. I think once I had been through that and once I had I started going to info sessions very early on because I was a professional planning officer and because I had to. So I think that's when I kind of learned that, okay, well, this info session is structured like this. They'll kind of talk about what their company is about, and then they'll do like a one-on-one networking thing. And the first couple I didn't really go and I didn't really talk to anybody. But the second or third time you go and you kind of say, okay, let me talk to this person, maybe get an understanding of what they do, and then email them afterwards. So slowly building your own set of connections throughout college by attending these events, I think is a great thing to do. And then second year, I started relying, I guess, more heavily on career buzz and then also info sessions. I personally tend to think info sessions are a lot more effective than a career fair, which is funny because both of our directors of info sessions are sitting here right now. But I think it's a great way to build a personal connection. So second year, I think that's most of what I did, which is what got me to my job at GE. Just going to, actually, it was funny. I think it was on my birthday. I went to the GE info session because nobody else could make it, and so I had to go, which was fun. And so I just ended up having a great conversation with the recruiter. I think also being on the ISE side of things is really helpful because they kind of see you as like a resource instead of a student who's just like there for a job, which is just, can always work in your favor. And then I think third year is when I came back from my junior years, no, at the end of my sophomore year, excuse me, is when I think I started looking at a different avenue. So really identifying what companies I wanted to work at and just looking at what resources they offered on their own websites, especially now that a lot of things are virtual. I think it's really important to just keep in mind that a lot of companies will host things on their own platforms. So I guess to answer your question in a very long-winded and I'm not sure very clear way, things that I looked at changed really heavily as I went through college. I think LinkedIn is always a great resource. I personally have never done the LinkedIn cold messaging, cold emailing thing, but I've heard it's worked for a lot of people. But I'm just firmly a believer in that, like, making personal connections and keeping up with them is the best way to get a job. And keeping up with those resources when you don't have to. So if it's just like a quick thing that, you follow after meeting somebody and then you send them a note, when you see their company in the news or something like that, just really keeping that at back of mind, I think for me has been really helpful. Yeah.
Those are all good points. I think like one thing that I've definitely realized throughout like the past 4 years is that each company has a very different recruiting process. And it's really hard to say you need to do this one thing in order to access this one company, because in all honesty, it could be completely different from one to the other. And if you're counting on one method to do it, you won't know that you're going to be able to reach someone. So I think first is like really trying to figure out what your interests are. Like for me, that was easy because I've always been interested in healthcare. So whenever I go to a career fair, like just filter on healthcare, usually there's like not a very large amount of companies. So it's pretty easy to like go and focus on which companies I'd specifically be interested in. But that's usually like a first approach. And then secondly, like Ria was saying, like finding the way to establish personal connections with anyone is also like incredibly important. And I think it also goes back to the fact that every company recruits in different ways. So if there's any opportunity that is presented to you to interface with a person instead of just a website, definitely go for that. Yeah, I think that's like the two big takeaways I've gotten.
Yeah, and then I can also kind of jump in a little bit. So I think, like they said, career buzz for me was really important. Having those kind of on-campus interview opportunities was a really big deal, at least for me. Like when I was going for Accenture, I did an on-campus interview, and I think it just really gives you the chance to kind of differentiate yourself from other schools, which is pretty important when you're looking at those big companies that are recruiting everywhere. And then a little bit more on kind of the networking side that I think is really helpful. This might be probably not completely specific to consulting, but I do think it's especially prevalent in consulting. Showing up is really important, not just going to one info session, but continuously having them see your face, like especially in a consulting role where it's so kind of personable and you need to be able to make those like personal connections with people and with clients. It's really important for them to see you making that effort, seeing you invested in the company, having you show up, ask questions. Like I definitely showed up to a bunch of Accenture things. I had a mentor from Accenture actually, which was really great, and getting to kind of talk through different things with him as well, and just kind of having those connections that you make at information sessions, which people should go to. But definitely having those kind of connections you make with recruiters makes a big difference. And I see those especially in those kind of events that different companies host, just being able to kind of show up, have them remember who you are, makes a difference. Being able to know the names of the people at the company. A lot of the time, I remember when I was interviewing at Accenture, they would ask me, oh, do you know anybody that works here? Like, have you had any connections with people? And being able to say a name was really important. That showed that, one, you took initiative and you'd already looked into their company, and two, you had a good enough experience to remember who they were, and you really made that effort there. And that's pretty important when you're looking at consulting companies. But in general, I find that any company would probably love to see that, just because of kind of you taking an interest in their company. A lot of people go into interviews, and when you get to the big question that's like, oh, why are you interested in this company, they either can't have an answer or they don't have enough kind of backup evidence, like, oh, I attended these events and really loved it, and things like that. So it's just really important, I think, to kind of show up, is how I'll put it.
I think actually to Kat's point, almost exactly, I think meeting people does two things. Not only does it help you get a foot in the door and they kind of know your name, but also if you don't like anybody who works for that company, that's probably not a company you want to be working at. It doesn't matter what that company's name is. And I feel like there are so many people who fail to take that into consideration. If you've met 10 people from company X and you don't like a single one of them, and you can't imagine getting lunch with a single one of them, it's probably not the place you want to be working. That being said, if you've met 10 people and you liked all 10 of them, then remember their name, show up to all their events, create a personal connection. I think at some point you realize that, and for me, this didn't happen until, maybe my sophomore or junior year. Like, they're just people. They're people who care about their jobs, who want you to be just as excited about what they do as they are. So if you can kind of get to that level where you stop treating them like these big scary monsters and you realize they're just humans, and you remember their names, and, like whenever you see them, kind of follow up, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, especially as a sophomore, because my first year, I just remember when I went to my first career fair, I just was like a robot when I talked to the first recruiter. I was so nervous. I didn't know what to say. And everyone else seemed so natural. They just seemed like they knew what they were doing. So just talking a little bit more about career fairs now that we have all those tips. And what do you guys think is the one thing that you should say, or what should you focus the most on, whether it's your resume, your appearance? What do you think is that thing that you said that maybe got you the internship, or that just makes you look good in a career fair?
Okay, I have one. This one isn't like super serious. It's just like, because reflecting on just this past like 2 weeks, talking to different companies, lots of different companies, and just like preliminary interviews, having a really interesting fun fact starts a lot of interesting conversations. So the fun fact that I've been going off of the past couple of weeks is, like, during quarantine, at the very beginning of quarantine, I was eating a lot of avocados, and I decided to plant an avocado seed. And also because it's virtual, now I can show off my tree to everyone. It started out as like a little avocado, and now it's like a freaking tree. Okay, like, also, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share it. I've been really excited about it, and when I tell recruiters about it, they are like, "Oh my gosh, that's actually pretty cool. Didn't expect it." And I think it helps you stand out if you have a unique fun fact.
Yeah, it's definitely that thing of creating a connection, just being yourself. I think that's something I've learned as well.
I've got a trick that I guess now that I'm done with recruitment at career fairs, now I can share with the general public. I've like kept this one hidden up my sleeve for a really long time. Back when, oh my God, this is going to sound really stupid, but I swear it worked every single time. Back when career fairs were in person, and this I think worked more so, let me reiterate, my freshman and sophomore years than it did later on, because I guess junior year it would have worked as well. But in the objective line of my resume, I'd print out 12 different copies of my resume with a different company and a different role on every single one. So if I wanted to work out, and it takes like 20 minutes, it's really not that bad. All you have to do is like change the company name, change the title. And if there's anything specific to the role that you see online that you can highlight in your resume, like literally read the role. And if they say, they want like a project management intern, like highlight your project management experiences. And once they see in the objective line, it's like, looking for internship summer 2020 with Home Depot, in X department, like people go nuts. It 100% guaranteed it'll work. That's my career fair dirty little secret that I guess I can pass on now.
I'm definitely gonna use that tip.
Yeah, that's so cool. I never would have thought about that, but that makes sense. So I guess for me, I don't know. For me, at least at career fairs, I've never been the best career fair person. I don't know. I saw a lot of people go around and get jobs, and it just was not me. That was not my best performance, I'll say, at career fairs. But I think the most important thing that I did see those people that were a little more successful than me at career fairs is you have to be able to kind of maintain a conversation and less just let me tell you who I am and regurgitate my resume to you. It's very much you need to focus on trying to once again create that connection like we talked about earlier. If you can do that and make it sound personable and you can keep a conversation, that's definitely helpful. I know one tip that I haven't tried because I just heard it in the spring. But one girl told me when she goes up to a company recruiter, every single time she goes up, she goes, "Hi, like I know you've had a long day. Do you want to get some water before we talk? Like you've probably been talking to a lot of people." And having a nice little like, "Oh, let me make sure like you're ready to talk to me. Like let me give you a chance to kind of take a moment to yourself," like she said was really helpful during her career fair stuff. So hopefully I'm not exposing her tip to everybody, but I think it's pretty cool and I'm definitely going to try it next time we're in person. So that's my tip, I guess.
I actually remember talking to you. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But
Go
let
ahead.
me say this real quick. I talked to you about this and you told me that tip, and I used it when we did like this career fair right now. It was online, and I offered like if you want to take like some water, and he was just like really generous and like, oh, thank you. Like no one really asked me for that, so I thought that was like a really good tip, and thank you, Kat, for that.
Yeah, I think that is a really good. I mean, also it just comes down to like treating them like people, you know, like if you were on the other side, what would you want to hear? And it's just being thoughtful. I think also something that a lot of people don't consider, and I can only speak for the IISE career fair specifically because I guess that's the only back end that I'm familiar with. This is also something that people don't tell you, and I'm hopefully this podcast is helpful in that it tells you things that people don't normally say. Most of the companies, I'm talking like 80% of them, especially those that have really big recruitment presences at tech, like Home Depot, UPS, Coke, all that kind of stuff, they will have on-campus interviews scheduled for the next couple of days. So they will literally have a sheet of paper behind their booth where you can write your name down and sign up. Man, I didn't know this until my junior year where I was actually competitive for a lot of these roles, but the goal is not to create a good connection. The goal is to get your name on that piece of paper that's behind their table. So that's not something people tell you. I wouldn't worry about it too much because there's no guarantee that, you know, they're doing the same thing. But I will say that like a significant number of them will have signups for interviews that are happening within the next couple of days, especially if they have a big tech presence. So that's just, I mean, take that as you will. I definitely wouldn't stress out about that too much if you're not getting to see that piece of paper, but it's almost always there. So just be mindful, I guess.
Yeah. Now that we're talking more about like interviews, like roughly how many interviews do you think you guys have done? Like overall?
I've done a lot, like a lot. My motto has been to never say no to an interview. And I think I've been very lucky in that, I guess, just by being so involved with ISE and just keeping up with a lot of professionals throughout my 4 years now, I'm kind of on the other end where people will just like reach out and be like, would you be interested in interviewing for this position? Even if it's not a position that I'm interested in, my motto has just been like always go listen to them. You never know if it's your dream job until you don't have the option until you have an offer. That's like very much my motto. So never say no to an opportunity. Yeah, just go in and worst case, somebody's getting paid to listen to you talk. It's like therapy, but reverse payment. So like what's the problem? You know?
You're practicing as well.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Great practice.
So, and like, what are the best ways to prepare for an interview? Since I know you all have been on an interview.
I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got about interviewing was, well, I asked, okay, so like in spring I had an interview for a scholarship, and at the end they said, do you have questions for us? And I was like, do you have advice for interviewing? Because I'm going to be applying for full-time in the fall. And the piece of advice that they gave me was like, an interview is not just them interviewing you, it's also you interviewing your fit for the company. And that probably plays a much bigger role when you're applying to full-time positions or applying to co-ops where you know you're going to be there for a significant amount of time. But it also helped relieve like a lot of the stress in preparing for the interview, because it's like, oh, it's not all about me. It's like also about like, what do I think about them? And again, like what Ria's saying, like they're people too. They're not here to just judge who you are as a person. Like they're here because they want to talk to you and see how you fit in the company. But just like general preparation tips. Know what you're interested in. And actually, like, one question that I got very recently that kind of like threw me off a little bit, which probably shouldn't have, it was like, what are 3 things you're looking for in a full-time position? And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I thought about that question, but I was like, that's important to think about just applying in the process at all. Like, what do I care about when I'm applying to these companies? Like, what similarities do exist between the companies that I'm actually applying for? Because like they want to know that. They want to know if you're fitting in with the culture that they have, but also, yeah, good to reflect for what you want too.
Yeah, I think my biggest interview tip that someone actually gave to me when I was like kind of going through all the interviewing at the fall of my sophomore year was every behavioral interview when you get in there, they're probably going to ask you either 1, why you want to work at the company, or 2, why you want the role, usually both. But even if they don't ask both, you should be able to work it into your answer somewhere. If they ask you why you want the role, kind of introduce it by, oh, let me first start off by why I want to work at this company, because there's roles like this everywhere. This is why it's important to me. And then you go into, and then specifically this role is interesting to me here. But it's just really important to kind of nail down why you want to work at the company, and don't just give an answer like, oh, I heard you do cool stuff. Like, you need a good answer for it. You need to pull their company values. Like, you have to sell them on the fact that you want to work at their company. Are you probably interviewing with a bunch of different places? Yes, but you still have to really sell them and make it seem like they're your top choice. Because if they don't feel like they're your top choice, they have other students that are making them their top choice, so they don't need you. So like, yes, you're very valuable as a candidate, but remember that there's a lot of other valuable candidates out there, and the most important part of an interview is to sell yourself to the company and really make it seem like you are their best opportunity there. So I think that's really important to kind of make sure you show your investment in a company when you're interviewing.
Yeah, I think Kat really hit it on the head. I think that was actually what I was going to say is make sure you know your why company X, like the back of your hand. If you prepare nothing else, prepare that and make it very specific to the company and make it genuine. So like, don't have the same why company X, but just changing the company name, because it's not going to come across as genuine, and it'll be very evident that it's not. I think other thing I will say is the way I typically go about interview preparation. I know everyone kind of has there's a method to the madness, but what's really helped me is looking at my resume and picking out 4 or 5 experiences that I think highlight parts of my character that are really important to me, or maybe difficult decisions that I've had to make, or just like 4 or 5 really good stories, and kind of practicing telling those stories in a way that I know can apply to a variety of questions. So just 4 or 5 examples, I think there's really no way a 30-minute to an hour interview is going to go beyond that. So just make sure you have like a structured approach to answering any question given those 4 or 5 stories, is typically, I think, like a good starting point. And then I would also say, be prepared to let the interviewer take it where they want to take it. I mean, a lot of these times these guys have been sitting in interviews for like 8 hours. And I mean, obviously we're not in person, but if you're at their desk and you see a picture of their kid and you're like, oh, I used to swim at the same swim team when I was younger, just be prepared to let it go that way as well. Make a personal connection. Don't get too attached. Don't get nervous. I have never gotten nervous before an interview until I started doing case interviews, and that's a whole other story we can talk about later. But being nervous is like the worst thing you can do for yourself before an interview, because you just shoot yourself in the foot before you can start. And then the last thing I will say is my interview theory, and I've never been wrong yet. If your interview lasts longer than 1.5 times the amount of time it is supposed to last, and you make them laugh, so if your interview is supposed to be 30 minutes and it goes 45, supposed to be 60, goes 90, so on and so forth, and you make them laugh, guaranteed you've got the job. I've never been wrong about that before, so take that as you will. Hopefully I never am wrong, but I think those are two pretty good metrics. I think the point is like, enjoy the conversation, make sure they're enjoying the conversation, don't be too stiff. So yeah, those are my tips.
Yeah, and I know that you briefly mentioned about case interviews. Just like, how do you prepare for them? I know, Kat, you also have done that. Like, just like 2 tips, real quick, for everyone.
I can go first. Mine's like not a ton of help probably. So I did 1 case interview. I've only ever done 1, and it's for Accenture. It's the job I got. So it ended up working out for me. But I, to be really honest, didn't think I had any chance of getting Accenture, especially because I was only a sophomore at the time. I had no work experience. There was really no reason that I would have expected to go in and get that. I was like doing my best. Like, I loved talking to all the people. All of my interviews up to that case study were really great. I just had really good conversations, and I think that's something that helped me get the job. But when I got to the case study, I of course had no prep. Like, I didn't look over a thing. They sent me a video. It was like an hour-long video. Like, this is what a case study is. So I watched that video, and it was basically like there's all these different types of like ways to model your answer to the question that if you've ever probably prepped for a case study, you've probably seen. And it came down to that night. I decided, I was like, there's no way I'm going to learn these the day before. So I just went into my case study and I was like, I'm just going to get creative and I'm going to come up with an answer, whether or not it is based on their model. So I got to my case study. I probably sat there for they gave me 10 minutes to look it over and then come up with a solution. I think I sat there for 8 of those minutes having no clue what I was doing. The guy was probably laughing across the table. And then in the last 2 minutes, I just threw something together. I was like, you know what, we have to come up with something. And I think that kind of level of creativity and that just keeping an open mind was what really helped me in my case study. Did I hit every single thing? No. But in most cases, when you're doing a case study, you're not going to hit every single possible thing. You're there for maybe 10 minutes. So just having kind of that open mind and creating a good baseline for what you're doing and having room for development, because I did leave some open spaces where he was like, oh, what if we helped you here? They definitely want you to succeed in most cases. So if you can just kind of create that base and make sure you're strong in that foundation, then you're good to kind of build in a case study. I think just narrowing down that kind of skeleton of your solution is the most important part that I found, especially if you aren't familiar with the type of models that go into a case study and kind of the different ways you can do that solution.
Yeah, I would agree with Kat. Really quickly, 2 things. I think before my first case with EY, I didn't even know enough to be nervous. I was like, yeah, they'll ask me in business. I was so overconfident. Now looking back on it, it's almost comical, but that ended up working in my favor. I just had a lot of blind faith in myself. So I just kind of solved the problem. And I think even after preparing significantly more in the last couple months, I think the logic still very much stands. Just be excited about solving the problem and you'll be fine. So 1, practice as much as you can. Don't rely on pre-existing frameworks. And then 2, just your mindset is 90% of the thing. So just make sure you go in there being excited and that's it. And you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think those are very useful tips, honestly. So since we're basically hitting the time limit, let's just briefly talk about you guys' research experience, since I know that's something really important. So how important is it to do research, and do you think that is it for everyone, or just in general, how would you describe that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I definitely don't think that it's an experience you need in college, but if it's something that you feel you have a particular interest in, for me, it was healthcare, and I knew that the research that we did at Georgia Tech was a way to kind of get experience with that, with not necessarily doing it in a professional setting. So that's why I was interested in. But if you're also interested in going to grad school at any point, it's also something really good to get started with, because applications to grad school sometimes expect that you have undergraduate research, because that's essentially what you're going to be doing in graduate school, to just research. And if you haven't tried it out and you don't know you like it, they probably won't believe that you're actually going to be a good fit for the position. So I guess in terms of the application, I think a lot of people, when they ask about research, they're like, oh, how do I find a position? And I think the way that Georgia Tech recommends it the most is just by going through the websites of research positions that you're interested in, finding the email the recruiter and sending them essentially a simplified cover letter saying why you're a good fit for that position, why you're really interested in that position, and what you think you can contribute. Personally, also the way that I got the internship, or not the internship, the undergraduate research position, was an email was sent out saying oh, we're looking for undergraduate researchers for the health analytics. And I was like, oh, okay. So monitor your email for opportunities. Opportunities are always flying by. If you don't read your email, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. But yeah, and I think overall, not an essential part of your undergraduate career. If you're interested in it, definitely go about pursuing it, because in a lot of opportunities, it can be a job as well. You can be making some money on the side as you're applying your skills and doing something that's interesting. But don't feel like it's an essential part to be a successful undergraduate.
Yeah, and I can touch really quick just kind of on my experience. So I'm in the same group as Melody. So similar to Melody, I joined because there was an email that went out. It was about getting involved, and I knew I kind of wanted to do research. So I think like the most helpful thing I can maybe give is why I wanted to do research, because I definitely don't want to go into research full time or anything like that. So it was very much really two reasons is what it came down to. The first one was I was still kind of deciding on a concentration and trying to explore IE. I was a sophomore, so I didn't really know anything. And I wanted to learn more about data analytics, and the research is in health analytics, so it really used kind of that data analytics approach to things, and I was able to get a background in it. And then second, I realized that I studied abroad the summer after my freshman year, which is pretty common, but it also left me with no work experience, and I knew I wanted to kind of build that up so I had something in interviews to talk about, because I really didn't have any kind of experience to be able to talk about. So my research was used for that. So once I got into that, I started having some background, some technical experience to be able to talk about in interviews. It looked better on my resume to have something like that. So for me, research really came down to getting a little bit of experience before I kind of got an internship or a job. And then also just kind of making connections. Like I ended up making a really good connection with the research professor. And she and I have like a really good kind of working relationship there. So it's really good to have someone like that on your side, especially here at Georgia Tech when kind of opportunities come through or you need recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked a lot about different aspects of being an engineer at Tech, about getting internships, about research. I think that this was a really useful call, honestly. Like, if you guys have any general piece of advice you just want to tell about just maybe just mentioning briefly what you love the most about being an IE here, or any quick advice that you have, just feel free to mention that.
I think my last note would be through all of this, I mean, all of us have been through it. We know how overwhelming it can be. And like when I say we know it, I mean, like we've really seen it. At the end of the day, the best piece of advice I can give you is to trust your gut and to do what you think is right. Because this will, I mean, your recruitment strategy, your research strategy, your class strategy, whatever it is, it'll end up happening the way it's supposed to happen. You just have to trust your gut. So don't worry about it too much and kind of believe that you have the tools to make the best decision, because you do. So that's something I kind of wish I had known coming in. Also learn how to code. Two separate things, but important. I never learned and I wish I had. That's all.
I think my last piece of advice is just in general when you're going through the recruiting process, remember to kind of stay personable. One of the biggest pieces I got like from somebody telling me about getting ready to interview and doing any career fair stuff was at the end of the day, these people that are interviewing you and that are talking to you realize that if they bring you into the company, they have to work with you. So if they don't like you, if you aren't personable, they don't want to work with you. Like there's like the idea if in consulting, if you got stuck at an airport for a layover with them for 4 hours, would you be okay with that? And if the answer is no, they're not going to hire you. So I think it's just important to kind of stay personable. Don't take things super personal though. If you get a rejection, it's not because they hate you. You just might not be the right fit, and it's probably not the right fit for you as well. But just stay kind of personable and make sure you remember they're people, like Ria's mentioned a lot.
Those are both really good. I think my last piece of advice actually comes. I was just reading like a short story the other day that was about like it was like a love story and people like not finding each other until like the very end of their life, even though they know each other for forever. But it just like made me think about how not everything is like one singular straight path to anything. Like for example, I am interested in going to medical school and I did like the pre-medical requirements in undergrad, but I don't see myself applying to medical school in like the regular application season that most people do in undergraduate. And like part of that is a little bit disheartening, saying like, oh, I'm not doing it when people are normally supposed to be doing it. But also I think it's an important part of like my journey to like feel out the different interests that I have and have adopted through my industrial engineering degree and like apply that knowledge somewhere where I know I can make an impact before like really pursuing like what like my dream is. So I think knowing that you are where you need to be right now, like a lot of what Ria is saying, don't like get too caught up in trying to be where you think you need to be, because you are where you need to be where you are right now.
Thank you guys. Really, we really appreciate your time here. And thank you everyone who's watching. And to our valuable speakers for just giving us all of this amazing information that we're probably going to use in the future, that I'm going to use in the future because I needed this advice. And just to our audience, stay tuned because we're probably going to release a lot more podcasts like this. And if you have any questions, just to our general speakers, if you have questions for them or just for the podcast in general, just look up through our website and maybe send us an email. We're just really open to hearing your recommendations, your thoughts, and if you have any questions. Thank you, guys.